They treated me like I was less than human, said Elim Dashasa shortly before taking her own life in 2012. Her final days were marked with physical abuse, isolation, and despair. This is a common tragical story shared by many foreign domestic workers in Lebanon. Now, the exploitation of foreign domestic workers in Lebanon is not a new issue. In fact, this is something that dates back to the Civil War period, and it intensified during the 90s when Lebanon opened its labor market for foreign domestic workers. According to Amnesty International, there is around 250,000 foreign domestic workers currently in Lebanon. And these foreign domestic workers are being employed by Lebanese families in order to help with childcare, cooking, cleaning, and other household duties. And on the paper, these jobs look promising. Sponsored visa, working in a private household, and the opportunity of sending money back home to your families. However, they do so under a system that leaves them vulnerable to abuse, the Kafala system, that has been described as a modern-day slavery due to several factors that we'll be discussing in this video. One of these factors is the fact that the Kafala system actually legally binds the residency of these workers to their employers, which means that the employers would have full control over the life of the workers in Lebanon. Secondly, the Kafala system legally excludes the foreign domestic workers from the Lebanese labor law, which also leaves them vulnerable to exploitation. And thirdly, as cited in a study from Amnesty International in 2020, the Kafala system would actually support the abuse, exploitation, passport confiscation, and even death in certain cases of these foreign domestic workers in Lebanon. And all of these effects have been strengthened due to the economic crisis that Lebanon has been currently facing, in addition to the wars. In other words, the Kafala system would so strengthen the exploitation of foreign domestic workers, as well as the violation of basic human rights. And in order to deal with this issue, we can propose many solutions. But before doing so, let's first of all try to understand the causes of this problem. Firstly, one of the major causes for this issue is, as I already mentioned, the legal exclusion of the foreign domestic workers from the Lebanese labor law. The Article 7 of the Lebanese labor law specifically excludes the foreign domestic workers and denies them the access to laws and rights that the Lebanese workers have access to, as for example, a minimum wage, a fixation of working hours, as well as resting days during the week. And so, this means that these foreign domestic workers cannot seek legal protection if any of these rights have been violated. Additionally, there's also the power imbalance, because the Kafala system would grant the Lebanese employer tremendous power over the life of these workers in Lebanon, by, for example, allowing them to confiscate their passports or also cancelling their residency permits whenever they want, which means that these foreign domestic workers won't be able to rent houses, apply for jobs, or leave the country without the permission of their Lebanese employers. Thirdly, there's also the racism and the discrimination in our society, because often the Lebanese employers are profoundly racist, in addition, of course, to the stereotypes in our society that strengthen the image that these foreign domestic workers are dangerous or disposable of. In addition, of course, to the language barrier and the cultural differences that leaves them vulnerable to the exploitation and abuse of the Kafala system. In addition to all of this is, of course, the people that are profiteering from this situation. Firstly, we have the employers in the Lebanese households that are benefiting from the situation, because these foreign domestic workers represent extremely low-cost employees for 24/7. For the middle and upper class Lebanese families, this would mean that these foreign domestic workers would be able to cook, clean, and take care of their children for extremely low wages that are even far below the Lebanese minimum wage. And they would also mean that they are housed inside of their homes, which means that they would allow them to spare expenses on accommodations and transport. And it's shameful to see that some of these workers are not even being granted a decent room inside of these homes, but just a small corner without any privacy, as if they were just domestic animals. In addition to all of this is also the recruiting agencies that play a major role in the strengthening of the Kafala system. As cited in a study by Human Rights Watch, the recruiting agencies and the Kafala system would generate more than $100 million each year. In addition, of course, to the recruiting agencies that are being accused of forced labor and human trafficking that would generate more than $57 million annually. And this is, of course, due to several factors, like, for example, the charges that they impose on the foreign domestic workers in order to be recruited by them. In addition to this is, of course, the Lebanese government that is being indirectly profiteering from the situation, because these foreign domestic workers are actually strengthening the Lebanese economy. By focusing on the household duties like childcare, cooking and cleaning, these foreign domestic workers would allow the Lebanese employers to focus on their jobs and so to make the economy function better. And so, in addition to this, the foreign domestic workers are also exempting the Lebanese government from spending money on social services like childcare and disability support, which would become a task left for these underpaid foreign domestic workers to take care of. In addition to all of this are, of course, the policies in place that are strengthening the Kafala system. Like, for example, the judiciary system that is unable to protect the foreign domestic workers. In addition, of course, to the lack of complaint mechanism, which would dissuade many foreign domestic workers from filing complaints against their employers. And even when they do file complaints with the help of local NGOs, the authorities are often unable to treat these cases as crimes. In addition to all of this is, of course, the Lebanese government that, as I said before, is profiting from the situation and is indirectly inhibiting the deterioration of the Kafala system. In addition, of course, to the foreign governments, like, for example, Ethiopia or the Philippines, that have banned the travel for Lebanon, but they have been unable to reinforce these decisions, and therefore the recruiting agencies have been able to find workarounds. After having discussed all of these causes, let's take a look at the effects that the situation could have on the society. And let's first of all start by discussing the psychological impact. Because of these inhuman conditions that the Lebanese employers inflict on their employees, like, for example, locking them away, inhibiting them from food, or inhibiting them from contacting their families, they would often result in severe psychological traumas, and often also it will lead to suicide. Moreover, some suicide cases would also be disguised as suicide in order to hide the fact that the Lebanese employers are actually killing their employees. Let's, for example, take the case of Desta, a foreign domestic worker that has been reported by the NGO This Is Lebanon, and which has been reported to be enslaved, burned, and beaten by her Lebanese employers. Desta has been forced to work for 14 months without being paid before being finally found deceased. Her employers have said that she had finally killed herself by hanging herself with hands that have been burned to the bones. Is this really plausible? In addition to this is also the effect of the social isolation, because many Lebanese employers inhibit their employees from having access to cell phones or from contacting their families, and they lock them away inside of their homes for months or even years. This will result in severe psychological disorders, like, for example, traumas, PTSD, and anxiety. In addition to all of this is, of course, the international image that Lebanon that will be tarnished because of this violation of the basic human rights. And so, having discussed the causes, the effects of the Kafala system in Lebanon, let's now take a look at the solution that could be proposed. Firstly, human rights organizations have been fighting the Kafala system in Lebanon for years through many different ways. Firstly, they have started by proposing model contracts, like, for example, in 2015 or in 2020, by trying to install fixed working hours and fixed salaries. However, they have not been supported, and so they have not worked. We have also the creation of hotlines and shelters by the NGOs that have helped the foreign domestic workers cope with their problems. as for example the NGO This is Lebanon, that has become a major hotline for the foreign domestic workers in Lebanon, as well as the spread of awareness campaigns. However, without effectively treating the root of racism in our society, these awareness campaigns will become useless. And so in order to effectively eradicate the problem of our society, we have to firstly start by eradicating the Kafala system and integrating these foreign domestic workers in the Lebanese labor law. This could sound pretty ambitious, however, this is the only way to truly and effectively eradicate this madness. In addition to this is also the fact that we have to give more power and strength for the local NGOs and organizations like Kafala and Caritas, and give them more funding in order to help them cope with this overwhelming flux of calls and calls for help, basically. And so I would personally also suggest to also start educating the employers and make them aware of the consequences that they could be facing when violating the human rights. In addition, of course, of trying to find an alternative for the Kafala system, an alternative that would be respectful of the human dignity and the human rights. And so in conclusion, it is possible to say that the foreign domestic workers have become very essential for the Lebanese households, as well as for the Lebanese economy. However, they remain vulnerable and invisible. The Kafala system enables their exploitation systematically. And so, in order to help them, it is imperative to start finding alternatives that would be respectful of the human dignity. These workers care for our homes, so let's take care of them and of their rights. Thank you.